I never thought I would find myself in a situation like this. My name is Jake, and I was married to Claire for over 7 years. We had built a life together that seemed perfect on the surface. A cozy house in a nice neighborhood, two adorable dogs named Max and Daisy, and a stable routine. But things changed. There were signs, of course, looking back. They were all right there in front of me, but I chose to ignore them. I thought it was just the typical ups and downs of marriage. Little did I know I was standing at the edge of a cliff, completely unaware. The first hint that something was off came a few months ago when Claire started spending extra time out of the house. She claimed it was work-related, that her firm was swamped with projects. I believed her, of course, because that's what you do in a marriage, you trust your partner. But there were subtle shifts. She started coming home later, reeking of cheap perfume that wasn't hers, and her phone became her new best friend. Always face down, always silent. I'd ask her about it and she'd roll her eyes, telling me I was being paranoid. "You're being ridiculous, Jake. It's just work," she'd say, her voice dripping with that condescending tone that would make my blood boil. I brushed it off then, chalking it up to the stress of corporate life. But then one night I got home early from work, and things took a turn I never expected. I had just stepped through the front door when I noticed something odd. Max and Daisy were barking at the door, their tails wagging as if they were welcoming someone. I thought it was Claire returning, but when I peeked out the window, my stomach dropped. There was our pet sitter, Tyler, leaning against his car, laughing and talking to Claire. They were way too cozy for my liking, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I decided to wait and hear what they were talking about. I stood in the shadows of the hallway, feeling like a voyeur in my own home. They were close, too close, and as I listened, my heart raced. The laughter morphing into something more intimate, something that felt wrong. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught snippets, flirty banter, whispered secrets, and then the words that shattered my world. "I miss you so much." It was like a punch to the gut. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks and my heart sink. My hands trembled as I pulled my phone from my pocket. I snapped a quick picture through the window, unsure of what I was even doing. I needed proof, something tangible to hold on to, because deep down, I felt like I was losing my mind. When they finally parted ways, I knew I couldn't let this go. I confronted Claire when she came in, my heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "What was that about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but I'm sure it came out more accusatory than I intended. She looked at me, confusion playing across her face before her expression hardened. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about. I saw you with Tyler." Her face paled for a moment before she quickly regained her composure. "You're being ridiculous, Jake. Tyler is just a pet sitter. You're imagining things." "I'm not imagining anything. I saw you." My voice was rising, emotions boiling over. The next few moments felt like an eternity. She stood there, arms crossed defiantly, giving me that icy stare that made me want to throttle her. "It's not what you think. You've been so distant lately. I needed someone to talk to." "Someone to talk to? Is that what you call it?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The lies spilling from her mouth tasted bitter, like poison. Claire continued to spin her web of excuses, but I could see through her facade. My heart ached, a deep hollow pain settling in my chest. All those feelings of trust and love felt like they had been ripped away, leaving a gaping wound. I needed to get out, to think, to breathe. I could feel the walls closing in on me as anger bubbled up inside, but I also knew that I had to control it. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for what came next. I had to figure out my next move. I couldn't let this slide. I wouldn't let her get away with it. My mind raced with thoughts of revenge and justice, a bitter sense of determination settling in. As I stared at Claire, I realized this was just the beginning of a long and painful journey. I refused to let her betrayal define me. I would take control of my life, and I would make sure that she understood the consequences of her actions. What I did next would change everything. The confrontation had left me reeling. Claire's smirk, her dismissive attitude, the way she practically shrugged off my pain, it all stirred something dark within me. I couldn't shake off the feeling that I needed to do something, to reclaim my dignity and perhaps, in a twisted way, protect what was left of my pride. I needed to show her that I wouldn't tolerate being treated like this. In the days that followed, I took a step back and observed her closely. Claire was a master of manipulation, and I realized I needed to play this smart. I started to document everything: the late nights, the unexplained absences, the vague excuses. I also began paying closer attention to the little things: the way she would rush off to the bathroom when her phone rang, the hurried whispers when she thought I wasn't listening. Each piece of evidence added to a growing sense of clarity that this was not just an innocent flirtation. This was an affair, and I was determined to expose it. One evening, I decided to confront her again. This time, I was armed with information. I had collected screenshots of our phone bills showing late-night calls to Tyler, social media messages that hinted at inappropriate exchanges. I made sure to keep my voice steady, suppressing the rage bubbling inside. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calm but firm. Claire looked up from her phone, annoyance flashing across her face. "What now, Jake? Now I'm done with your lies I know about you and Tyler." I dropped the bombshell, watching her reaction closely. For a moment she looked genuinely startled, but that quickly morphed into anger. "You've got no idea what you're talking about," she snapped. "You're being paranoid again. I told you he's just a pet sitter." "Then why have you been calling him at all hours? Why do I see the two of you laughing and whispering?" I pressed, my heart racing. I could see her mind racing as she scrambled to formulate a response. "Those calls were for the dogs. They needed medication reminders, and I was trying to coordinate schedules. You're making a mountain out of a molehill." Her voice was defensive, but the tremor in her words betrayed her. "Give me a break, Claire. I've seen you two together. I have proof." I slid my phone across the table, showing her the messages and call logs. Her face drained of color as she scrolled through them. "I can explain," she stammered, but I could see the facade crumbling. "It's not what it looks like." "Then what is it?" "Because every word you say sounds more ridiculous than the last." I leaned closer, my voice low but fierce. "This isn't just some casual friendship. I can't believe you thought you could get away with this." The silence that hung in the air was palpable, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I watched as she searched for words, her expression shifting from defiance to desperation. "Jake, please," she began, but I cut her off. "I don't want to hear your pathetic excuses anymore. You've betrayed me, and I deserve better than this." I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me, the initial shock of betrayal morphing into a determination to reclaim my life. As the confrontation unfolded, I felt the emotional roller coaster of betrayal, anger, and a little sadness. It was as if I had entered a battlefield, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. I was done being the fool in this relationship. I wanted to confront this head-on, and I refused to be the victim anymore. After our heated exchange, Claire tried to negotiate, to plead for another chance, but I was resolute. "You've made your choices, Claire. It's clear to me that you don't value this marriage, and I won't waste my time trying to make you see reason." Her face twisted in anger and sadness, but I wasn't going to back down. I left the conversation feeling a mix of relief and bitterness. It was hard to believe that someone I once loved could betray me so deeply. But I was determined to take control of my life. I knew I couldn't just sit back and let her walk all over me. There had to be consequences for her actions. I took a day to think about my next steps. And that's when the idea hit me. If she could betray my trust with a pet sitter, I could make sure the pets would stay with me. After all, they were my companions, my family. Claire might think she could waltz in and out of our lives, but I had plans to ensure that she would feel the weight of her decisions. The sudden rush of emotions fueled my resolve: anger, betrayal, but also a strange sense of clarity. I began to outline my revenge plan. I would keep the pets, showing Claire just how little she truly understood the life we had built. If she wanted to cheat, she would lose everything else that mattered. It was time to turn the tables, and I was ready to execute my plan. I knew I needed to be careful. Claire was smart, and she wouldn't go down without a fight. But I was ready. I couldn't wait to see the look on her face when she realized that I was the one in control now. With a plan forming in my head, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The next step was crucial. I had to gather evidence not just for my own peace of mind, but also for any potential legal battles that might arise. I knew I couldn't simply kick Claire out without justification, and I wanted to ensure that I had leverage on my side. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about making sure that I came out of this mess on solid ground. I began by documenting everything meticulously. I set up my phone to record conversations, discreetly noting down her movements. I even installed a few security cameras around the house under the guise of wanting to keep an eye on Max and Daisy. Little did she know that these were not just for the pets. They would serve as a crucial piece of my evidence. Every late-night visitor, every shady phone call, every whisper exchanged, it would all be on record, and I was ready to use it. As the days turned into weeks, Claire's behavior became increasingly erratic. She'd leave for work but would come home later and later, often reeking of cheap perfume again. Her excuses became flimsy, and she would lash out at me more often, trying to deflect the guilt and shift the blame. "You're the one who's been distant, Jake. You don't even pay attention to me anymore," she would say, her voice laced with that familiar bitterness, but I was onto her games. I picked my moments to confront her, dropping hints that I knew more than I let on. "I'm just trying to understand why you've been so busy. It's like you're living a double life," I would say, watching the color drain from her face. Each time I did, I could see her scrambling to maintain her composure, her facade slipping a little further. Then came the night that changed everything. I had decided to take a calculated risk for my plan. I invited Tyler over to discuss some pet needs under the guise of needing help with Max and Daisy. I figured if I could catch them together again, it would seal the deal on my evidence and make my case stronger. I wasn't sure how Claire would react, but I felt like I was finally regaining control over the situation. When Tyler arrived, I was polite but kept a close eye on him. There was something about the way he interacted with Claire that set my teeth on edge. He was charming, confident, and had that easy smile that made it clear he could wrap her around his finger. I watched them as they chatted, the way her laughter came a little too easily, how she leaned into him as if he was the only one in the room. It was sickening. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Hey, Claire," I called out, dropping my voice to a low, calm pitch. "Can we talk in the other room for a second?" Her eyes flashed with panic, and I could see her mentally calculating the best way to respond. Yeah, sure." "Just a moment, Tyler," she said, dismissing him with a wave. Once we were out of earshot, I confronted her. "What the hell is going on? You look like a deer caught in headlights." She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "Don't even try to deny it. You're still seeing him, aren't you? You think I don't know?" Claire's face twisted with anger. "You're being absurd. This is just business, Jake. You're the one making this complicated." "Business? With someone who has no business in our lives. I can't believe you're still trying to play me like a fool." It was at this moment that I felt a surge of defiance and anger. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "I'm done playing games, Claire. You think you can have it all. You can't have him and everything else too. If you want to live this double life, fine, but I'm keeping the pets. They deserve better than this." For a moment, Claire looked genuinely shocked, then that shock morphed into rage. "You can't just keep the dogs from me. They're mine too." "Really? Because it sure seems like you've chosen someone else over them." When Tyler peeked into the room, I quickly changed my tone, putting on a smile that felt foreign. "Everything good here?" he asked, and I could feel Claire's frustration radiating off her. "Sure is, just discussing their feeding schedule," I replied sweetly, but I could see the tension in Claire's posture. After Tyler left, she exploded. "You think you can just keep the dogs as a bargaining chip? That's low, even for you." "Low? You're the one who brought this all on by cheating. I'm just ensuring that Max and Daisy are safe and cared for, unlike how you've treated me." What I didn't anticipate was her next move. Claire snapped back. "I'll take this to court, Jake. You think you can just take them away from me? The judge will see right through your little game." It was a threat I hadn't planned for, but it didn't deter me. I knew I had the evidence to back up my claims, and I was ready to fight tooth and nail. "Bring it on. I'll show them exactly what you've been up to." As the conversation ended, I felt a wave of calm wash over me. I realized that I was no longer the victim in this situation. I was taking control back. I would fight for my pets, for my sanity, and for my dignity. The emotional turmoil was still there, but I was determined to channel it into something productive. The revenge plan was slowly coming to fruition, and I felt a sense of satisfaction in knowing I was setting things in motion. The consequences of her actions were just beginning to unfold, and I was ready to take the next step in reclaiming my life, one way or another. The days after our confrontation felt surreal. I was on a mission, and the adrenaline coursing through my veins pushed me to stay focused. I knew that Claire would fight back, and I couldn't afford to let my guard down. There was no room for mistakes. While I was gathering evidence, Claire was becoming increasingly paranoid, and I could see her trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage. She started playing the victim, telling friends and family that I was the one overreacting, that I was controlling and unreasonable. But I was prepared for this. I reached out to some of our mutual friends, trying to get a sense of what she was saying. I wanted to know what narrative she was spinning. It turned out, Claire painted me as the jealous husband who couldn't handle his wife having a life outside of their marriage. I wasn't surprised. Manipulation was her specialty. One evening, I decided to host a small gathering at our house. I invited a few close friends, some who had known us as a couple, and others who had only met Claire a couple of times. I wanted to show a united front while subtly letting the truth slip out. I didn't want to create a spectacle, but I needed witnesses. I wanted everyone to see just how much Claire had changed and how she treated me. As guests arrived, I kept my demeanor upbeat, making sure to engage everyone in conversation. Claire showed up late, dressed to impress, her hair perfectly styled and her makeup flawless. She glided into the room, a smile plastered on her face, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. It was like she was putting on a show, and I was determined to play along, at least for a little while. Throughout the evening, Claire seemed to be in her element, flirting with the guys and basking in the attention. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, but I reminded myself that I was in control. When the conversation shifted to relationships, I took my chance. You know, marriage is about trust and communication, I said, my gaze fixed on her. Claire smirked, tossing her hair over her shoulder. Absolutely. It's all about being open and honest, right? I could feel my pulse quicken as I pressed on. I agree, it's important to be there for your partner and not keep secrets. Her smile faltered for just a moment, but she quickly regained her composure, deflecting with a laugh. Well, everyone has their moments, don't they? The tension in the room was thick, and I could sense that guests were catching on. I decided to turn it up a notch. Yeah, but some secrets can really hurt the people you love, I added, intentionally letting my gaze linger on her. One of our friends, Sarah, who had been sitting nearby, raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about, Jake? I took a deep breath and decided to be bold. Let's just say that sometimes the truth comes out in ways you never expect, and it can be painful. Claire shot me a warning glare, but I pressed on. Like how you might not realize how much someone means to you until you put them on the back burner. Wow, are we getting dramatic now? Claire retorted, her voice dripping with mockery. But I could see the cracks in her facade begin to widen. The party continued, but I felt an undercurrent of change. The guests exchanged glances, trying to decipher the tension between us. I could feel Claire seething, and it fueled my resolve. If she thought she could play the victim, I would make sure everyone saw her for who she truly was. Later that night, when the guests had left and it was just the two of us, Claire confronted me. What the hell was that about? You think you can just air our dirty laundry in front of our friends? I folded my arms and leaned against the kitchen counter. You brought this on yourself. If you hadn't been sneaking around behind my back, we wouldn't be in this situation. She scoffed, her annoyance palpable. I can't believe you're trying to make me look bad. You're the one acting like a jealous lunatic. Jealous? No, Claire, I'm angry. Angry because I trusted you and you shattered that trust. Her eyes narrowed and I could see the gears turning in her head. You're going to regret doing this, Jake. You think keeping the dogs will hurt me. You're wrong. You're just making a fool of yourself. I felt the weight of her words, but I stood firm. I'm not the one who's been acting like a fool. You've turned our lives into a mess. You think you can have it all. You're mistaken. I'm not going to let you walk away from this unscathed. The tension hung in the air, and I could see her calculating her next move. You really think you can win this? You think keeping the pets is going to make a difference? I leaned closer, my voice low and steely. It's not just about the pets. It's about making sure you understand the consequences of your choices. You fooled around and now you'll pay for it." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. I felt empowered by my decision to stand my ground, but there were moments of doubt. I couldn't help but wonder if I was doing the right thing. Was I really ready for a confrontation that could lead to a messy divorce? As much as I was driven by anger, I was also terrified of what the future held. But then I would remember the way Claire had treated me, the lies she spun, and the betrayal that cut deep. I knew deep down that I had to follow through with my plan. I continued to gather evidence, ensuring that I had everything documented. I even consulted with a lawyer, preparing myself for the battle ahead. The more I learned about my rights as a pet owner, the more determined I became. I would not be walked all over. In those moments of clarity, I reminded myself of why I was doing this. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life and proving to Claire that I wouldn't be her doormat anymore. I would show her that she had made a grave mistake, one that she would regret for a long time to come. As I prepared for the next phase of my plan, I felt a sense of resolve. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face the consequences. Claire had made her choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. The emotional roller coaster was far from over, but I was prepared to fight back with everything I had. As I delved deeper into my plan, the days began to blur into a relentless cycle of gathering evidence and preparing for the inevitable. Fallout. I became a master at juggling my emotions, compartmentalizing the hurt and betrayal while maintaining a facade of normalcy. For the sake of our friends and family, I continued to attend social gatherings, acting as if everything was just fine. But inside, I was a storm brewing, ready to unleash my fury. One weekend, I decided to take Max and Daisy to the park, hopping to clear my head and enjoy some time with my pets. They were my saving grace during this tumultuous period. Watching them run and play brought a semblance of joy to my otherwise chaotic life. I sat on a bench, observing other families enjoying their time together, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of longing for the life I once had, before Claire's betrayal shattered our world. As I played with the dogs, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to do more than just prepare for a potential legal battle. I needed to build a strong case against Claire. I decided it was time to confront Tyler directly. I wasn't sure how he would react, but I felt it was necessary. He needed to know the damage his involvement had caused, and perhaps it would rattle him enough to rethink his actions. Later that week, I invited him over under the guise of needing help with some dog training tips. When he arrived, I could feel the tension. He walked in with that same easy charm, but I saw the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes when he realized I wasn't the same laid-back guy he might have known. "Hey, Jake, what's up?" he said, his smile faltering slightly as I gestured for him to sit down. "Thanks for coming." "I just wanted to talk about something important," I said, keeping my tone steady. "How well do you know Claire?" Tyler's brows knitted together, confusion flashing across his face. We just met through the pet-sitting gig, nothing too serious." I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "Look, man, I know about you and Claire. I've seen what's going on, and I'm not here to threaten you. I just want you to understand the mess you've helped create." He shifted in his seat, suddenly on the defensive. "I don't know what you think you know, but Claire and we didn't mean for any of this to happen. It was just supposed to be fun." "Fun?" I echoed, the bitterness rising in my throat. "Do you think this is a game? You're wrecking a marriage and a home. You're playing with people's lives here." The color drained from his face. "Look, I didn't know she was still with you. She told me you two were having problems." "Problems? Yeah, thanks to her lying and sneaking around." My voice rose, but I quickly regained control. "You don't get to play the innocent bystander here. You should have known better." Tyler opened his mouth to protest, but I continued. "This isn't just some fling. You're taking advantage of someone who is vulnerable. You need to step back and think about what you're doing. If this continues, it won't end well for any of us." The tension in the room was palpable, and for a moment I thought he might push back. But then something in his demeanor shifted. I could see the realization dawning on him. "I didn't mean for it to get out of hand. I thought we were just having fun." "Fun?" I interrupted, my voice thick with anger. "How about considering how I feel? Do you think that's fun? You need to end this, Tyler, for your sake and mine. Claire is not worth the trouble." He nodded slowly, and for the first time I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "I'll talk to her," he said quietly. "You're right. I didn't think about it that way." "Good. I hope you do." I stood up, feeling a sense of victory wash over me. At least for now, I had planted a seed of doubt in his mind. As he left, I felt a mix of relief and anticipation. Confronting him had felt empowering, but I knew this was just the beginning. There was still Claire to deal with, and I needed to prepare for the ultimate confrontation. The following days were filled with a strange sense of anticipation. I kept waiting for Claire to react to my conversation with Tyler, but she seemed oblivious. It was as if she was living in her own world, still believing she could manipulate everything around her without consequences. Finally, the moment of truth came. I had decided I would confront her one last time before moving forward with the legal proceedings. I wanted her to know precisely how her betrayal had affected me and to confront her about her choices. One evening, I waited until she came home from work. "We need to talk," I said, my tone serious. Claire glanced up, annoyance flickering in her eyes. "What now? I'm tired, Jake." "This isn't about you being tired. This is about us, our marriage, and the choices you've made." She rolled her eyes, but I pressed on. "I spoke to Tyler. He knows you've been lying. He's going to end things." Her expression shifted from annoyance to disbelief. "You did what? You spoke to him?" "Yeah, I did, and I made it clear that this has gone too far. You've crossed a line, Claire." She took a step back, her facade faltering. "You think you can control everything. You think you can dictate my life. It's not about control. It's about consequences for your actions. You've betrayed my trust, and I'm not going to let you walk away unscathed." The anger in her eyes flared, but there was something else lurking beneath the surface: fear. "You can't do this to me, Jake. You'll regret it. I'm done with your threats. I've already consulted with a lawyer, and I'm prepared to fight for what's mine. You may think you can manipulate everyone around you, but this time you're on the losing side." She looked at me, her expression shifting between anger and desperation. "You really think you can win? This isn't just about the pets, it's about everything we built together." "Built together? You mean the life you destroyed?" "You've made your choices, Claire, and now you'll have to face the consequences. I'm keeping Max and Daisy, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes to protect them and myself." The confrontation hung heavy in the air, and I could see the reality setting in for her. It was a turning point, and I knew that our lives would never be the same again. I was prepared for the fallout, ready to face whatever came next. As Claire stormed out of the room, I felt a mixture of emotions: anger, determination, but also a sense of freedom. I was reclaiming my life, and no matter how messy it got, I was ready to face the consequences. Battle wasn't over yet, but I was armed with the truth and a newfound strength. I was done being the victim. It was time for me to take control. The fallout from that confrontation was immediate and intense. Claire was no longer the composed, manipulative spouse I had known. She became a tempest of anger, denial, and threats. It was as if she had been backed into a corner, and now she was fighting like a cornered animal. I watched as she tried to regain her footing, making frantic calls and sending messages, but I remained steadfast in my resolve. There was no turning back now. Within days, she had reached out to her family and friends, spinning her narrative as the victim of my supposed jealousy and control. I could almost hear the sympathy in their voices as they expressed their concerns for her. I'd expected this, of course. Claire was an expert in manipulation, and it was painfully clear that she was trying to rally support against me. But this time, I was ready. I had begun to gather my own support system, reaching out to friends who knew the truth and were willing to stand by me. I arranged to meet with my lawyer again, laying out my case and ensuring everything was in order. The thought of going through a legal battle was daunting, but I felt a sense of clarity this time. I was not just fighting for myself. I was fighting for Max and Daisy. They were innocent in all of this and deserved a stable, loving environment. I was determined to give that to them, no matter the cost. Claire's behavior escalated. She would storm through the house, blasting music, throwing things around as if trying to drown out the reality of what was happening. I remained calm, often retreating to the living room with the dogs, focusing on our bond and the comfort of their presence. In those moments I found solace. They were my anchor amidst the chaos. One night I was sitting on the couch with Max curled up beside me and Daisy resting on the floor when I heard Claire's voice rise from the other room. "You're going to lose everything, Jake. You think you can win this? You're ruining our lives." I took a deep breath knowing this was part of her strategy, manipulation through fear. I did respond. I let her vent. I was no longer affected by her empty threats. It was liberating to realize that I had moved beyond her games. Eventually, the long-awaited court date arrived. I walked into the courtroom with a mix of anxiety and determination. I had prepared for this moment. I had all my evidence neatly organized, screenshots, messages, and the recordings I had gathered. I was ready to lay bare the truth of our marriage and Claire's betrayal. The courtroom was tense, and I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on us. Claire sat at her lawyer's side, and it was evident she had spent hours perfecting her strategy. Her eyes darted around the room, but when they landed on me, I could see the flicker of uncertainty. For the first time, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. I was no longer the submissive partner. I was a man seeking justice. When it was my turn to speak, I felt the weight of my emotions, but I channeled that energy into my words. I recounted the timeline of our relationship, the signs I had ignored, and the pain of betrayal I had endured. I laid out the facts clearly, supported by the evidence I had gathered. I could see the judge's eyes narrowing, the seriousness of the situation sinking in. Claire's lawyer attempted to discredit me, making me seem unreasonable and jealous. I held firm, answering each question calmly and confidently. I knew the truth was on my side, and I refused to let her manipulate the narrative any longer. The moment the judge ruled in my favor felt surreal. I was granted primary custody of Max and Daisy, and it felt like a weight had lifted from my shoulders. The judge made it clear that Claire's actions had consequences, emphasizing the importance of a stable environment for our pets. I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph wash over me. Justice had been served. After the ruling, Claire erupted in anger, hurling accusations and insults as I walked out of the courtroom. I could feel the stares of onlookers, but for the first time in a long time I felt unburdened. I had taken control of my life, and I was ready to start anew. I didn't need Claire's approval or validation. I had found my strength. As I left the courthouse, Max and Daisy by my side, I felt a sense of closure. I had learned valuable lessons throughout this ordeal. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, but I had discovered my worth in the process. I realized that love shouldn't be about manipulation or deceit. It should be built on mutual respect and honesty. In the months that followed, I focused on healing. I spent quality time with Max and Daisy, nurturing our bond and creating a new routine. I sought therapy to help process my feelings and learned how to let go of the anger that had consumed me for so long. I was determined to be a better version of myself, not just for me, but for the pets who had seen me through the darkest times. Reflecting on everything that had transpired, I found a sense of peace. I could finally move forward without the weight of Claire's betrayal dragging me down. I had emerged stronger, more resilient, and ready to embrace whatever the future held. To anyone going through a similar situation, my advice is simple: stand your ground. Don't let anyone manipulate you or dictate your worth. The truth may hurt, but it is also liberating. Surround yourself with supportive people and focus on the things and beings that truly matter. Life is too short to remain in a toxic environment. Fight for the love that deserves your dedication, whether it be for yourself or for those who depend on you. In the end, I knew one thing for certain. I had chosen the right path, and I would never look back.